Once Dr. Bowen arrived and Andrew's body was discovered, those on scene began to ask where Abby was. Lizzie had stated that Abby received a note from a sick friend, asking her assistance at this friend's home, and Lizzie assumed that she had been out. Lizzie was asked to search the home for her stepmother, but she did not want to. Instead, she asked Bridget and a neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, to search instead. Bridget, who was extremely rattled, and Mrs. Churchill, who was confused about what was occurring, were both hesitant, but agreed to look for Mrs. Borden. The pair walked up the steps to the second floor of the home, where they immediately saw Abby lying on the floor beside the bed in the guest room. Bridget ran downstairs to alert the officer present in the home, and Mrs. Churchill approached the lifeless body of Abby, bearing witness to the brutal nature of the crime. Officer George Allen was the first officer on scene, as other officers were in Rocky Point, Rhode Island, attending a police function. Once both bodies were discovered, he immediately called all hands on deck, and the other officers returned back to Fall River. When the bodies were examined in the places they had been killed, they noted that while Andrew's blood was bright red, fresh, and still flowing from his wounds, Abby's blood was dark brown and congealed. They determined there was a significant time difference between the two murders, about 90 minutes. While Dr. Bowen ran to send a telegram to Emma Borden, who was visiting friends in Fairhaven, Alice approached Lizzie in the sitting room. Alice attempted to undo the collar of Lizzie's dress. Back in those times, clothing was very constrictive and she feared that Lizzie may faint due to the stress and heat of the August afternoon. When Alice was reaching for the buttons of Lizzie's collar, Lizzie grabbed her hand and said to Alice, "I'm not going to faint." Alice asked Lizzie where she was during the time of the murders, and Lizzie told her that she had been sitting in the hot, dusty barn searching for sinkers for her upcoming fishing trip with friends, and that she spent about 30 minutes seated in the barn, eating pears that she had picked from the family's blossoming pear tree. Soon after this, Lizzie ascended the stairs to the second floor of the home, and entered Emma's room. Alice soon followed after Lizzie, wanting to be a comfort to her, and when she entered Emma's room, she witnessed Lizzie tying the strings of a pink wrap dress that she had just put on. At the time of the murders, Lizzie had been wearing a blue gingham patterned dress. Officers were puzzled by the lack of blood surrounding the bodies. While there was blood pooled around their heads, there wasn't a significant amount of blood spatter along the walls and furniture. Despite the lack of blood spatter, an officer who arrived on scene went on to say that he had been a soldier in the Civil War, and what he had seen in the Borden house that day had been more grisly and depraved than anything he had ever witnessed in war. In fact, despite the gruesome scene, he stated that he was very surprised at how undisturbed and calm Lizzie had been. Many officers that day noted how calm and collected Lizzie appeared to be, some stating that she had been cold and distant, even. When an officer had been speaking to Lizzie about Abby, he called Mrs. Borden her mother, and Lizzie sharply corrected him, saying, "She is not my mother. My mother is dead." Authorities began to interview Lizzie, where she repeated the same story about Abby going out to a friend's, and how she had been in the barn searching for sinkers and eating pears. Lizzie then offered them some interesting information. She stated that there was a bowl of bloody rags in the cellar downstairs, but to not worry about them, because she was soaking those rags to remove the blood due to her menstrual cycle. It is assumed by many that the police felt bringing up this information was scandalized, because at that time, men did not talk about such things with women, and they were quick to let that fact go, and ignore the bowl. Officers wanted a more concrete timeline of Lizzie's movements that day, and she explained to them what her day had looked like. She claims that when her father got home, she entered the kitchen to heat up some irons to iron some handkerchiefs, and while she waited for the irons to get hot, she flipped through an old Harper magazine. She then remembered her upcoming fishing trip, so she left through the kitchen door, leaving it unlocked, went to the pear tree and picked 3 pears, and then entered the barn. She sat in the barn that was well over 100 degrees inside, as it was 90 degrees outside, and slowly ate her pears, looking at the home, and then rifled through the barn for the sinkers. She claimed that at one point she had heard what sounded like a groan, and then a scraping sound. After hearing that, she went back into the home where she discovered her father, dead, and sounded the alarm. Despite Lizzie, who was outside the home and in the barn, Bridget, who was in the home, stated that she heard nothing of the sort. During this question, police asked Lizzie if there was anyone who would have wanted to hurt her father or mother, and Lizzie stated no, there was no one that she could think of. Alice, who was standing nearby, overheard this statement and interjected, saying, "Lizzie, don't you remember what you told me last night?" Lizzie backtracks, stating that there had been a previous break-in of the home, and that her family had been very sick that week, and she believes they may have been poisoned. Many speculate that the prior break-in to the home where items were stolen might have been stolen by Lizzie herself, as she had a known history of stealing from local shops. Lizzie frequently shoplifted around town, and Andrew would soon after quietly pay her debts to the store owners. Lizzie also offers 2 new stories to the mix. She claims that 1 or 2 weeks prior to the murders, there had been a man she did not know in her home, speaking to her father in a different room. She had overheard this man telling Andrew that he wanted to set up his business in one of Andrew's buildings, but Andrew refused to allow it, and a verbal altercation had occurred. Following the altercation, Andrew had demanded the man leave his home. Officers asked Lizzie who this man was, and she claimed that she did not know, but that she assumed he was from out of town, because she had overheard him say that he needed to return home and speak to his business partner. In another instance, Lizzie recalled that she had seen a dark, shadowy figure lurking around her home one night when she returned back to the Borden house, but she could not give any further details. They relieved Lizzie and allowed her to go to her room after their questioning. Later in the day, police wanted to search Lizzie's room, particularly to take a look at her clothing. They ascended the stairs and knocked on Lizzie's door, but they were greeted by Dr. Bowen. Dr. Bowen had been in the room treating Lizzie with morphine to settle her, and police asked permission to search the room, as it was custom to never enter a woman's room without permission in the time period. Dr. Bowen closed the door, spoke to Lizzie, and returned asking if it was absolutely necessary. Officers claimed that it was, and the room was searched, but nothing of value was discovered. The rest of the home was also searched, and they removed 2 axes and a hatchet from the cellar. Neither of these hatchets were attributed to being used in the crime. Officers also scoured the barn, where they noticed that there had been no footprints in the dirt floor of the barn, and they believed that no one had been inside of it for some time. On the evening that the murders took place, Alice Russell had stayed the night, along with Lizzie and John Morse. Alice had slept in Abby and Andrew's bed, and later went on to state that it gave her a very eerie feeling sleeping in that bed, knowing that Andrew and Abby never would again. While the 3 occupied the home, the 2 slain bodies were still laid out on the dining room table downstairs post-autopsy. That evening, Officer Joseph Hyde was posted outside to watch over the crime scene, when Alice exited the home at 8:30 to tell him that they were going to bed. Alice went back inside, where she encountered Lizzie. Lizzie told her that she was going to empty the bedpans in the cellar downstairs, and Alice offered to do it for her, but Lizzie refused. Alice then offered to hold the lamp for her at the very least, and the 2 entered the cellar, where Joseph Hyde could see them through the window due to the glow of the lamp. He watched Lizzie dump something into the sink, and the 2 women went back upstairs. 15 minutes later, Hyde sees Lizzie enter the cellar again, this time alone. He observed her place the lamp on a table, and walk over to the sink, where she stood for about 2 minutes. Due to Lizzie's back facing him, he could not see what she was doing. The next day Hyde asks Alice about the incident in the cellar, and Alice tells him that she went with Lizzie down there. He clarifies that he saw them both go down there, but that Lizzie returned on her own 15 minutes later. She tells him that Lizzie must have gone down there while Alice was in the bath. She also stated that she wants to show him something. She brings Hyde to the room that she was staying in, and points to a 20-inch club on the foot of the bed, stating that it had not been there before and she was scared. Alice wound up staying one more night in the Borden home, but slept in a different room. She believed the club may have been put there to scare her, and deter her from staying another night. The funeral for Andrew and Abby were held on August 6, 1892, in the family home. After the funeral, police ask Lizzie for the clothing she had been wearing on the day of the murder, and she hands over 3 items: a dark blue blouse, a patterned skirt, and a white underskirt. Lizzie approached the mayor, who attended the funeral, and asked him if they have any suspects. The mayor began to dance around the subject, not wanting to give any yes or no answers, but when Lizzie pressed the subject, he told her that yes, they did have a suspect, and that suspect was her. Lizzie stated, "Arrest me, then." The following Monday, Alice was back at the Borden home, but she had to leave to run a few personal errands. Alice arrived back at the home around noon, and entered the kitchen to find a surprising scene. Emma was standing near the sinks, and Lizzie was standing in front of the wood-burning fireplace, with strips of blue fabric in her hands, feeding it to the fire. When Alice asked Lizzie what on earth was she doing, Lizzie replied that it was an old dress that had paint on it, and she wanted to destroy it. Knowing how bad this looked, Alice was disturbed, and she briefly stepped out of the kitchen to reflect on it. When she entered the kitchen once again, Lizzie was still burning the dress, and she could see more blue fabric shoved inside a cupboard, behind some pots and pans. Alice tells Lizzie that she shouldn't let anyone see her doing that, and Lizzie didn't respond, instead meeting her statement with silence. That same day, police searched the Borden home again. They started in the barn, then the attic, making their way down each level of the house until they ended up in the cellar. When previously searched, officers collected 2 axes and a hatchet, which they didn't believe were used in the murder, but during their new search, they discovered the blade of another hatchet with its wooden handle broken off. It had not been there during their first search. This blade had a white, ashy substance on it, which made it appear to be old, but the other tools in the toolbox where the blade was found did not have this white ashy substance on it. Police believed that it may be the murder weapon, and it had been put into a fire to destroy any evidence. That same day police spoke once again to Alice, and they specifically asked her if she believed that all the dresses and clothing in the home were still present. Alice hesitantly said yes, despite knowing of the burned dress. After this line of questioning, it had nagged at Alice that she had lied and covered for Lizzie, so Alice approached her and Emma, telling them that she was upset about having to have lied to the police. Alice told Lizzie that burning that dress was the worst thing that she could have done. Lizzie responded to this statement, saying, "Why did you let me do it, then?" At this point, Emma steps in and tells Alice that her and Lizzie both agree that she should be forthright with the police and tell that what she had witnessed, and that they are not worried about it. After Alice comes clean with the police, they search the home for all clothing and determine none of the clothing had any paint on it. However, they already knew that one item of clothing, a blue dress, had a pinpoint blood stain on it. Lizzie claims this was from her menstrual cycle. The inquest. An inquest was held on August 9 to 11, to see if there was enough evidence to arrest Lizzie Borden for the murder of her father and stepmother. Several people were questioned during the inquest, including Lizzie herself, John Morse, and Bridget. Bridget had a very clear and concise timeline of the day of the murders, and her story never changed. When John Morse was questioned, he had an airtight alibi. He left the Borden home after breakfast, went to his niece's home, and on the way back, he took a trolley home, of which he had remembered the exact trolley number, along with each name of the 3 priests he met and spoke with on the ride home. Some would later come to think that his alibi was a little too detailed. After Bridget and John's testimonies, Lizzie was brought to the stand. The authorities specifically wanted to see if Lizzie's account would match Bridget's, and they wanted to see if her story had at all changed. However, her story did not match up with Bridget's version of that day, and Lizzie's story began to differ from her original account. This time, Lizzie claimed that she had woken up after everyone had already eaten breakfast, and she couldn't remember if she herself had eaten breakfast or not. She stated that she saw Mrs. Borden downstairs dusting, wearing her informal clothing that she cleans in. She went on to say that Andrew Borden descended the stairs to leave the home for the morning, and the 3 women went about their daily chores. Lizzie claims that she then took out her irons in the kitchen and set them on the stove to heat, which differed from Bridget's account, who stated that Lizzie did not do this until after Andrew already came home. Under Lizzie's account of that morning, this puts her in the kitchen around the time leading up to Abby's murder. When asked how long this might have taken her to do, Lizzie says that she does not know. They determine that since this was during the time of Abby's murder, Lizzie does not have an alibi. When Lizzie was asked where she was during the time of her father's murder, she testified that she was in the kitchen reading the Harper magazine, before she went out to the barn. This, however, contradicts Bridget's testimony about hearing Lizzie laugh at the top of the stairs when she let Andrew Borden into the home. Moreover, if Lizzie was at the top of the stairs when her father was let in, this would put her directly in the line of sight of Abby's body in the guest room. This prompted further questioning, and Lizzie was asked if she was sure that she was in the kitchen during the time period her father went into the sitting room and was murdered. Lizzie claimed that she was not sure, that at one point she had to go upstairs to sew tape onto a garment, but that it only took 5 minutes. She was asked once again if she was upstairs when her father returned home, and she said that she did not know, but she thinks so, contradicting her first statements. She then definitively claims that she was in fact downstairs in the kitchen at the time. Lizzie then testifies that the last time she saw Abby was downstairs dusting, when she told Lizzie that she had received the note from the friend, and she would be leaving to go attend to them. However, no one ever came forward to claim that they had ever written this note, and it was a known fact that Abby did not have many, if any, friends in Fall River. Lizzie was asked if she had seen her stepmother leave, and Lizzie stated that she did not. She was told that if she had been in the kitchen that morning like Lizzie claimed, that Lizzie would have seen Abby ascend the stairs to change into her proper clothing to leave the house. It would also be impossible for Lizzie to not have seen Abby come back down the stairs when Abby went to leave the home. Lizzie vehemently denied having seen Abby go up or down the stairs. Police determined that it was virtually impossible for an intruder to have committed the murders, because the house was locked up tight so much so that Andrew could not access his own home that morning. They also found it suspicious the amount of time that had lapsed between the two murders, noting that the killer had to have waited around for 90 minutes between killings. They also pointed to the fact that nothing had been stolen from the home. And finally, they also noted that it was strange that only Andrew and Abby had been murdered, when both Bridget and Lizzie were present on the property that day. The inquest concluded that the motive for the murder was that Lizzie was angry at her father for being so stingy, and the hatred she harbored for her stepmother, and believing that she would financially gain after their deaths. If Abby had not been killed, her father's inheritance would go to Abby, so they believed that Abby had to die first. Lizzie Borden was arrested directly after the inquest. It was stated that Emma sobbed at the verdict, but Lizzie didn't flinch. When asked if she wanted the arrest warrant to be read to her, Lizzie refused. Join me tomorrow for the final conclusion, Part 3, the trial.